What's going on, everybody? Cody and Jim here with Convert, talking about a topic that we frankly get a little fired up about. So
Cody's real fired up.
I've been looking forward to this video.
Real fired up.
This is something I really love to talk about, and that's adapting to a changing market and a changing consumer. Jim, the game is being changed, whether people are ready for it or not.
Right.
Help me understand where we're at as a real estate industry.
Well, first and foremost, I think, obviously the things we've been preaching for the last 3-4 years is dials are dying. You can still get a hold of people, but it's not going to be people that don't know you. People are ignoring calls. We just got done with election season. I mean, maybe. We'll see how the courts play out. Could be another month. But people are tired of robo-dials and political dials and everything else. And if they see a number they don't recognize, they're not going to answer it. And so you have to adapt your strategy. We've got a lot deeper into text. We've got a lot deeper into our past clients and really trying to grow by doing things differently than everybody else.
And so you've been in real estate now 6 years, correct? Yep. And so tell me a little bit about how, not just the ISA world, but the real estate world as a whole has changed since you entered real estate.
Well, I think the big model, that KW used back then that everybody preached about was circle prospecting. Circle prospect, door knock, circle prospect. I can just tell you right now, if someone knocks on my door, I don't even answer it. More than likely, it's Amazon dropping off a package. So, and that's if I'm home. I'm not going to answer the door anymore. People just don't do it. It's weird. Circle prospecting too. I don't have any relationship to you, nor did I initiate a conversation. That's going to piss me off if you call me. And so, from that standpoint, that's changed a lot. There's still companies that do it. There's still teams that do it and that are successful with it. But typically, I think it's more in smaller rural settings. That's the teams I see using it to a success. Doesn't mean it can't work in urban areas or larger metropolitan areas, but it's getting outdated, in my opinion. And there's ways to do it now digitally, and that's how we're transitioning, right? Instead of doing circle prospecting via door knocking or phone dials, maybe we're doing circle prospecting by saying just sold and attacking all the neighbors around that listing that just sold and showing that. There's other ways to do it as well. It's weird. Handwritten notes are a thing again. That's how I get a lot of business. I get a lot of expireds that way. I get a lot of sphere that way. And it's changed. 5 years ago, people were still doing handwritten notes pretty often, and now they're not. And so it tends to stand out a lot more. It's, sales and life is kind of cyclical, right? You look what worked, what didn't work. It's going to be changing constantly.
And I think back to, I don't know if it was 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago at a KW family reunion, and Gary Keller, made the announcement. I think this was right about when they were either really rolling out Cal, or they were about to roll out Cal, where Gary Keller said, we're not a real estate company, we're a tech company.
Yep.
And that, in my mind stood out as wow, okay, because Gary Keller, love him or hate him, he has been really, really driving forward this ideology. And frankly, folks, you cannot afford to be left behind.
Right.
And it's just scary to me. And I think, I think in the next 5 years, especially, I can't say I'm fearful of it. People are going to get pushed out of the market.
Yeah.
This is already an industry where, new agents, the failure rate is obscene, let alone the fact 5 years from now, and some of the stuff that I keep seeing, whether it's at a mastermind or just out in the industry, people just don't get it. They don't get it.
Yeah, so I had a conversation the other day. I grew up with this guy. He's one of my best friends. He's been in the industry 5 years. He's independent. He has his own brokerage. This year, he was down. Out of everybody I know, he's the only person that's down. And I'm like, well, what are you doing for lead generation? What are you doing for tech? What are you doing for all these things? He's like, oh, people know me. They're going to use me. And it blew my mind. I'm like, how can you think that in today's environment? How can you just think, oh, people will remember me when, they're looking at houses? No, they're not. They're going to do what's convenient. They're going to press the first realtor that comes up. And so it's amazing to me that more companies don't get this, quite frankly. I grew up in jewelry, and that's the industry I was in. A lot of jewelers don't get it either. It's, oh, this is the way we've always done it. We don't need to have technology. The product speaks for itself. No, it doesn't, because you still need customers to come in the door.
And so let's dive into that a little bit. Let's talk about the conversion process, from interested party to the point that they are a client of yours. How has it changed? From the time that you've been in real estate to, moving forward, where do you see it going?
Well, I think the big thing that I've noticed is consumers really, people are going to hate that I say this, they don't need us that much anymore. They literally do just need us to open the door sometimes and write the contract. And so when they're coming in, 5 years ago, you would come in, they wouldn't really understand the process. They wouldn't really understand what their credit score needed to be. Now, when I'm having a conversation with people, they're volunteering that. They're saying, well, my credit score is 705. I just spoke with my bank last night. I have this much down. I know the process typically takes this. They're much more educated. They're looking at your reviews. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, there wasn't really that many reviews. There was a couple, but there wasn't the emphasis on it. They're finding you by, Googling terms. They're not going to look in a phone book. They're not going to, talk to their friends. They're going to look at how many reviews do you have, and what are those reviews. And whoever has the most reviews and has the best reviews, nine times out of 10 is going to win.
And so, people expect and know more about the process than they ever have before. And I think that's, I think that's industry to industry. That is just a trend. You think about, I've got my cell phone here. I've got access to information faster than Nixon had, when he was president.
Right.
And the great example of this is, the car industry. You've got literally, you've got companies like Carvana where you just got a literal car vending machine. I know more about the process. I can make it happen faster than I ever could, in the past. So I can research. I know what everybody's inventory is. I know, Kelly Blue Book. I know, and I can have multiple financing offers in minutes. The process is getting so fast. And we've just kind of accepted that. And as an industry said, well, that won't be us. Are you kidding me, guys?
That's every other industry.
It's obscene to me. And so, let's look at post-COVID, because and obviously we're not there, and I'm sure we're not even close to it. But, I think COVID was really kind of a kick in the pants for a lot of people. And for some of the people watching us, they might have, might right now be having their best year ever. And, you've heard Eric put out videos and talk about it. People may think that, hey, we had our best year ever and think that it's about them. But, how much of it is the consumer market and how much of it is, living in this COVID environment. And with that in mind, what do you think the post-COVID environment looks like when it comes to lead conversion and, selling houses?
Well, I think we're going to do a lot more virtual tours. I think that online presence and online staging, online 3D tours is going to be much more valuable. I think people are going to want to schedule whatever time works for them. They're not going to work around your calendar. I think there's going to be a lot better automation with Calendly, things like that, where people are just going to say, I want to see this house at 3 o'clock. Great. I'll send an automated text. Okay, we'll meet you there. Get some sort of pre-qualification, but people aren't putting up with that shit no more. And so if you listen to my calls now, it's really, before it was pre-qual, now it's spider sense. And now it's validation of, hey, I don't think there's anything wrong with him. While I'm on the phone with him, I'm going to do some data validation and say, okay, yeah, there's no bankruptcy, there's no foreclosure, there's not an axe murderer, things like that. And I do this with every call that I book an appointment for because I want to validate and say it. Because quite frankly, if I see that, I'll just flat out ask him. I'll just say, hey, looks like you had a bankruptcy that just got discharged 8 months ago. And people get a little creeped out. They're like, how do you know that? I'm like, it's public record. I can look up all the data on you. And so it allows you to have much more frank type conversations, franker conversations, excuse me. So, but yeah, I think the consumer's no longer going to put up with your schedule. They're no longer going to put up with your type of lead gen. This brings up another thing. Look at a lot of agents I knew out in New York. Their entire business was built around expireds. Como did you can't call expireds, you can't call anybody to lead gen. Their business literally died for 6 months because they had no other ways. What they should have done, and maybe some of them did do this, is doubled down on the relationships, try to help out. You saw some people do that. Hey, if you're in need, you need something, I'll drop it off at your house. Relationships are going to matter. Reviews are going to matter. Everything else doesn't really matter. Doesn't matter if you have a billboard. Billboards don't mean crap anymore.
Well, I think it's really interesting because, we talk about the way that people are, building their business and they're building their businesses around the right now. And I think this applies double to ISA departments because they're often the most stubborn, when it comes to, because frankly, the equation really hasn't changed a lot, And
how stubborn was I with the changes we did this year? I was very stubborn with it. I hated it at first.
He is the worst.
That's true.
But what blows my mind is when I think about, you know, you mentioned like the virtual tours and not, you know, people not being willing to work around your schedule, or, you know, I mean, the amount of pushback we get alone from saying, hey, we need 24 hours notice, you know, like, no, we cannot do a same day showing. That world's going to come to an end, whether we want it to or not. And if you take one thing away from this, I want it to be this. When we think about competition in the real estate world, in the real estate sector, and when we think about the things, you know, Zillow is the perfect example, right? Everybody loses their mind over Zillow. I mean, Zillow sneezes and, you know, everybody talks about it for 6 months. Zillow is not the enemy. You know, Zillow is not the one that's going to come in and destroy your business. It's not the Redfins. It's not the Purple Bricks. It's not, you know, these super mega brokerages that are coming into your town. It's not even the smaller or, you know, any of the competitors in your town. Hear this and hear me well. The people who are going to completely disintegrate the real estate agent model, the entire real estate industry, they're sitting in their dorm rooms right now because it's the third-party developers. It is all the people that you have relied on to solve problems that have been in front of you this entire time that you just haven't taken the time or the care to solve because it wasn't a right now problem or that wasn't your problem to fix. They're the ones who are coming in. They're going to bleed you dry. And if you want to stop paying, that's fine. They'll move on to the next one until they can solve the problems themselves. You know, I mean, look at Uber. You know, completely democratized transportation.
Actually, yeah. Let's have this discussion. So, if every agent in the United States cut Zillow today, what do you think would happen? Would that stop Zillow, or would that speed up their timeline? And all they do is say, "Hey, we're going to go do a private fundraise. Our plan is to now do this the next year." It was a 10-year project. It's not going to do shit. And so you can complain about it all you want, or you can actually do something about it and build your business around stuff that works.
Well, I think, you know, when you think about, like, Zillow is a great example where, you know, yeah, you might cause a minor headache. It might be a disruption. But on the same end, I think Zillow needs real estate agents, you know, and their business is kind of built on the ability to take that and hand it off. Now, for them to scale a real estate business, you know, create broke down. I mean, they created that, what was it, 2 brokerages, 3 brokerages, and people just lost their minds. And yet, at the same time, they're not organizing their database. But they'll gladly pay for it, you know? And the same companies that they're using to organize their database are then taking that database from them and redistributing it. You know what I mean? It's not these big, giant mega corporations. It is this small third-party vendors who are solving these problems that are in front of you that you don't know how to solve. And, you know, I think people don't see that, but that is going to be the one that, you know, absolutely pulls the rug out from them. And you just think about the world that you live in. And, I mean, let's just talk about content, you know, because we're on our phones consistently. We're reading our news from our phones. We're watching videos. We're on TikTok. We're on social media. You know, the largest aggregation of news sources in the world is Twitter. More people statistically get their news from Twitter than anywhere else. And why not? I mean, there are some of you who might be, watching this and rolling your eyes, but why wouldn't you? If I can get a complete aggregation from people I trust and people whose opinion I value who will share these news articles for me, or I can get them directly from 15 sources and scroll through in milliseconds and know bite-sized chunks of information, I can consume a lot of information very, very rapidly. Do you think that, your website or something can't be aggregated? Right. I mean, Zillow did it. Zillow's already done it. And so, people just think about, the future, and they don't apply what they're already doing day to day to their own business. Right. And especially, this is critical in lead conversion, because I think that's where people are going to get stung first and foremost, because it's the easy one, to pick up leads and to talk to people.
You know what finally made me actually believe in what we talked about? So I was on my phone, and I got like 3 unknown dials in a row, and I ignored them all. And I'm in a business to answer phone calls from people. My job is to talk to people, and I'm ignoring people. And I was like, maybe we need to do more automation and go to where the consumer's at, because what used to work isn't going to work anymore. And I don't like it. I'll be blunt, because I don't have as much control with it, but I do have control. It's just different control. It's the control the consumer wants. It's the convenience. I can control the activity that the consumer will like because of the convenience of it.
And I want to put a pin in that, because automation, we have a big series of videos planned just on automation alone. I can talk about that all day long, and I think that people get caught up on automation thinking like that's the thing, that's what's going to save my business. No, it's not.
Right.
You know, if you can't answer certain questions, if you don't have, I mean, let's be frank, if you don't have your shit together, like automation is going to destroy your business, and I've seen it happen firsthand. You know?
Yeah, I'm super organized, and like I sent one of our partners an error today. What I noticed is all of my automated plans, even though it had the hyperlink for putting in my name in that text message, was putting in his name. And so people were getting...
Which was awesome for me.
Yeah, but people were getting confused because they're like, well, no, I talked to Jim. And so even if you have automation, if there's screw-ups in the automation or the developer isn't doing things correctly, it can cause mass problems.
And I think that really kind of brings up that whole other topic of like, how do people want to be communicated with? You know, because I think we saw the writing on the wall, you know, honestly, like 2 years ago. It was just kind of adapting our approach and figuring out, and the hardest thing for us was to break out of our mold.
Yep.
You know, Jim, when we talk about automation, Jim didn't like me because I told him, Jim, you need to automate more, or, you know, here are the things you need to automate. He didn't like me because of the amount of work that gets put on your plate because you had to have these certain things together. And
I had to automate 7,000 clients.
Yeah.
Like, it was insane. It's still not done. It's 80% done.
And it's not even just the auto plans. I think about like the
Yeah.
LQ beta protocol, which we'll do a separate video on, but you know, we were able to strategically raise our conversion rate and our response rate on PPCs by an obscene amount. For every 1,000 leads, we had less than 130 that wouldn't get converted.
And when he's talking converted, he means contacted.
Yeah, contacted and, you know, into an appointment funnel. So, you know, not all of them are going to be this year appointments. Those pop off right away, but most of them will close. And it wasn't because we just came in and we were using tools we already had. It's knowing where the data lies, how to solve the problem, and then where to strategically put tools. You know, we weren't doing anything that was particularly novel that we didn't already have access to, you know?
We're just replicating other industries. That's what you were doing. I mean, literally, you were doing the Toyota method with a lot of it. And we'll talk about that in our next video, give you an intro. But yeah, I feel like, especially real estate, mortgage brokers, insurance agents, these industries are very antiquated on how they project manage and how they grow and how they just don't look at other industries.
And so as we think about this changing landscape, you know, both in real estate and technology and, you know, consumer behavior as a whole, because that drives a lot of, you know, whether you know that or not, you know, you need to be paying attention to consumer behavior. How do people learn about it? You know, how does anybody learning or watching this video learn, hey, the landscape's changing and I'm not changing with it? How do you know and how do you adapt?
Yeah, I think look at what works. There's plenty of sites out there you can look and see, okay, how many users does TikTok have? How many users does Instagram have? What do people like as far as communication? Go do some research. There's plenty of publications out there that can actually do that. I'm sure you can name a few.
And I think kind of, you know, within that same thread is watch what you're doing. I'm blown away by the amount of realtors who say, oh, dials aren't dying, they're still effective, and then are texting everybody they know day to day, you know? I was asking them, like, well, when's the last time you called your mom? And you'd be amazed how many people don't really have a good answer for that. You know, there is no separation line. You know, it's people. It's all about people, you know, whether that's the consumer or you as a person. Like, you know, I mean, watch what you're doing. Watch the behavior of your kids or young people, especially. Like, they're where the market's going, you know?
Yeah, watch the behavior of who your target audience is, right?
Seriously.
So, I mean, if your average buyer is 30-year-old female, what do? Go find out.
Yeah.
Be on those platforms. Communicate in that way. You know, it's interesting is Cody used the, when's the last time you call your mom? I only call my mom because that's the type of communication she wants. Because my mom's blind in 1A, so email is really tough, text is really tough. You text your mom, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the communication she wants. That's the communication that works best for you. We're doing whatever works for the consumer. In this case, it's our moms. And what's most convenient for us. Because I do it when I'm driving. Driving to work, I'll call my parents. It's easy. I can still drive and do something I want to do, have a good conversation with them. They're happy because their baby boy called.
Yeah.
So.
No, 100%. And so when we think about, communication, that's a little bit easier one, as we see kind of changing mediums. But what about everything else? How do people keep plugged into the world of changing technology? And how do people bridge the gap between what's on the consumer market as far as technology and what's applicable day to day in real estate?
That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, I'm actually going to rely on you for this one because I feel like you may know this better than I do because I am not as good at this as Cody is, quite frankly. So how would you do it?
Well, I think you need to understand, and when I say this, not necessarily understand like you need to know how to code, right? But what I mean is you need to keep a pulse on what's going on in business and technology. Like there are 101 publications, some of them you might already get, whether it's Forbes, whether it's, Good Business, whether, any of these magazines, these trade publications, like keep your pulse on them. Also, the thing that blows me away in this industry is people only take application advice. When I say application advice, i.e., this texting conversation we just had, the advice to plug it in, it amazes me that they don't get business advice from other sectors, that they only get business advice from real estate people. Like that just blows my mind. Like it's just not something that is scalable. And when you think about the changing consumer landscape, because you're not selling houses to realtors, like you are selling houses to consumers. You need to understand where the consumer's at and what they're living in.
And understand it's not about you.
Yeah, 100%.
And understand this landscape over the next 10 years is going to probably be the greatest change in business environment and human technology, human interaction, and probably ever. And so there's some fundamental changes coming to every industry, whether that's blockchain, don't even get me started on crypto, but there's some huge changes coming. And if you do business the way you've always done it, you're going to have an issue like my friend had, where his year was way down. And it's like, we're living in two separate worlds. He's living in what's convenient for him. We're living in what's convenient for our client. And that's the thing that ultimately controls every decision we make, is what would the consumer think? What is best for the consumer? Start there. If it's less convenient for my agents, but it's more convenient for the consumer's going to win. They will always win because they're going to have a better experience. They're going to think more highly of you. You're going to get more referrals. I don't care about your schedule. I don't.
No.
I care about what the consumer wants.
Yeah. I think that's a good place to stop it before
Awesome.
we go too far down the rabbit hole. But.
Sounds good. We'll see you guys next time, and thanks for watching.